Welcome to Insights. I'm Eric. Thanks for stopping by this morning. We're going to talk about CF Industries again. We've brought this one up since, first we talked about it during a flip 22 months ago. You can see it here. 22 months ago, this primary trend flipped up for 186% gross profit so far. This you don't really make any money until you sell something, but this is just where we stand in terms of the paper. But this reset 30 days ago. That's quite a while. The computer doesn't pick up on any of it too much. It's gone from early cycle to a mid. Still pretty early, and composite trend is 0.11, which is barely above the zero line, which everything below that tends to be early. It tells us that there's some type of extension growing, and that's just right here in the daily. You can see it by the price cycles zero point 0.8, the time cycles 0.68, and they are picking up. Once they cross above 1, these will change from blue to red, and they'll start picking up until they get above 2, and then they'll get bolded, and the computer will try and shut down the trade, at least the chasers. But for now, we're going to take a look at where we stand in terms of not only the evolution of the trade, which is still triple up, but in terms of some of the reversals and where we stand in terms of the breakout of jumping the creek, releasing that coil, which at one point was defined at about 112.58. We can see in terms of the seasonality, we've probably entered a strong seasonal point. It gets pretty strong towards the end of the year. That's probably because they're going to start to buy up fertilizer for the next year's crop. This could be really interesting because if you do break out, you're really going to run in terms of the price of CF, but it also means constrained supplies for producers and farmers and probably all over the world. So let's take a look at some of the things that are floating around on the internet, what the majority is talking about. You can see the price action. That's what traders focus on, but I don't really look at it the same way. The computer definitely doesn't look at it the same way as the rest of the world, and we're going to try and describe some of that. You can see for last 6 months here, you can see a coil that's developing, and price tried to break above it, and you can see there was a gap here as it swung above 112, but it failed to hold. It closed the gap. The gap was closed on a lower volume, which doesn't really mean too much. It's kind of a false breakdown below the breakout gap too. There's a lot of noise here. This could represent still that what we talked about up here is a curl back and a kiss before it takes off again. That's why I don't really follow highs as in being that important. Some people put their trades in like that. The computer definitely doesn't see that. And we're going to look at see where the computer finds important reversals at. It's really not in here. It's actually down in here. But if you can break away from the coil, get it well defined, we're going to have to pull away from this complex here. The coil is defined from 112 down to 78 roughly and some change on both sides. You're going to have targets of 133, 167, 221. I have to say that we're probably breaking out from this coil and releasing the coil at this stage. You'll know it when you see it, probably time. Again, a kiss back down is not uncommon. A lot of times you kiss and fill gaps. Since this gap was not filled and then closed above on lighter volume, it broke back down. Kind of tells you that there wasn't a lot of action here, and the computer confirms that. It does not find anything so far, did not find anything in terms, and did not pinpoint anything in terms of the weekly time frame. So we're just going to have to treat that as noise. There's a gap here, there's a gap down, kind of all washes itself out. So we're going to watch this. One of the things that we're watching it for is we probably consider it in terms of a fundamental explanation. That we know that fertilizer plants and fertilizer itself is derived from natural gas, and we can see the problems with natural gas generation in Europe. This is the Ford German price of electricity, and this is pulled from the internet. You guys can pull it off social media. Everyone got ecstatic about or concerned when the price was spiking like this, and we saw these charts on a daily basis, and it's almost like you monkey see, monkey do. And now that they're coming down, I also see some commentary that we have a crisis averted now. See, it's not as bad, at least the idea goes, it's not as bad as it looks. Things are coming down. But the fact is that inside of Europe and a lot of the processing plants, and it's not just for fertilizer, it's for all sorts of things from, metals production, from glass, a lot of industrial components that you can see it for automobiles, everything that's out there. They're starting to shut it down. And here's the example. You can go look it up in Bloomberg. Fertilizer costs are rising as countries are shutting down production plants. As they shut down production plants, the forward electricity rates come down, and that's just shifting the crisis from one place to another. You either the crisis of having to pay for the electrical bills, and if you shut these plants down long enough, you're going to send the prices of fertilizer higher, or the prices of glass higher, or you're going to have shortages or hoarding, or and if the plants stay closed long enough, you're going to have people getting laid off. I mean, it shifts the crisis. So to sit there and say this is a crisis here, but no longer it's an averted crisis as this line comes down, it just ignores that everything is interconnected. And you just pass the concern. If this lasts long enough, the concern will come into labor as people get laid off. So you might not have high electricity bills, but you might not have any money to do anything else as you get laid off. And this is the problem. There's a structural problem that's going on inside of Europe. We're not here to talk about that right now. That's in some other reports. We talk about it in the economy and oil report that's ongoing. We talk about some of the things that are going on in terms of the stock market, the global economy, and the special report. I would check out the website for those. You can read up on that just as well as you can read up on this. It's best to understand more than just following CF Industries or following the fertilizer. A lot of this stuff is interconnected, and once you start to realize that, you see how much trouble the global economy is in, and you start to punch holes inside the economic discussions and the political discussions that are taking place. There is no easy way out. I mean, we love to say this is you do this. Some things that you could do to solve it they're not willing to pursue that. Not yet. Perhaps it will be chosen by force in time, and then. But we can talk about that more later. We're really here to talk about CF Industries, and what we're establishing here is that plants are knocking down, electricity rates are coming down, but plants are shutting down. Plants for LNG plants that create this stuff, and other they're derived based on hydrocarbons. They're shutting down, which then ultimately means the supply of this stuff is going to be constrained, and then price is going to go up. If you get higher prices, a lot of that times translate into higher stock prices. But you have a real problem that's going on out there. If we get back to where we were in terms of whether or not this coil is going to jump the creek, we established some rough lines here, and they look to be false. With the computer, we knew this a while ago. The computer, and we're pulling this from the Versal tab here. We pull out CF, and I pull out the weekly gaps, and I print these, or I pull them and I copy these over to a chart, which then shows them for us. The computer identified the important reversal at 95 and 96 and a half and 97 and 66. And that's way down here. That's where it's saying, hey, there's the most volume here. And once we clear above that, it really was off to the races, which it was well before this. The market reset, and you can go back and look at the lead D for CF, and you can see when we flipped back at 725, and the price was 89.93. And during the discussion, which this is ongoing, these reviews are ongoing, we said that once we get above this 97.66, this thing would really take off. And you can see it's right around about here, 97.66, and that's what it did. It took off. Now it's come back down to almost test that area, an area of which everyone assumed this was a false breakout. But the fact is the breakout took place at much lower levels, and we're still above that. As long as we stay above that, we're in a breakaway or breakout from the pack situation. There's no more reversals above this to slow this down. It's quite easy to keep this organized and keep this into markup, provided that the cycles here or here or here don't get too far extended. And most of it's painted, it's light blue or it's black, and then it's negative, which means we don't have that as a problem. So we're above. We've jumped the creek. We've jumped the creek at a level that we we probably wouldn't even recognize. But I think you're going to, in order to release this coil, you're going to have to get it sustainably above at least a 105, maybe 106 handle. We're starting to do that again. We'll see how this goes. You got to give it some room. You always have to be skeptical of everything anyways, but you do have to give it some room, which most people can't, because they either use too much leverage, they use something that requires time decay or has time decay on it, which forces you to make decisions rather than just owning the company. The company, owning the stock, you take enough counterparty risk for the paper side of things and then the company risk of poor management execution, but it is better than using too much leverage. If we take a look at what's going on in terms of who's buying and selling the Pro Index, you can't see it much by these reversal levels. So we slide down and we always study the Pro Index. Pro Index is way out here. It's over in here when you open up your matrix. You see it, CF Industries. We know we're entering a strong seasonal period, and the pros must know it too, because here's price, here's the Pro Index, here's the public. The pros are buying away. They've been leading this up, or they've been confirming it, mostly leading the breakout along the way. It's jumped the previous high just and right ahead of price. Now we've come back, but you can see the public hasn't been doing much buying whatsoever. So this is a professional driven rally, which is another added bonus of which you should keep an eye on. See if this continues to clip out and generate a new high, or at least confirm price. That gives you more confidence that professionals are leading the way, and if they lead the way, we're likely to maintain markup. Markup that's been 22 months up, not always completely in one strong, continuous, unbroken impulse. This is a monthly trend that sees ebb and flow. Sometimes the daily cycle falls out of alignment, sometimes the weekly. Each one of them creates a reset. The only way you can get into CF Industries again here is if you saw a reset. It would be highlighted yellow. You'd have an R in the phase column. But for now, we've bought the reset. We have the flip. The core position is long, and you just have to hold it. You hold it until at least something more damaging takes place. The first damaging sign would be a close below 96.5. That's I mean, we haven't done that. If you do that, you get back into this big air pocket, provided the computer doesn't find another reversal. The other thing that's likely means that the recent action up here was relatively meaningless is that the computer didn't find a weekly reversal up here. It often does that when a move is about to end. We saw that in the S&P 500. We saw that in Bitcoin. We see it in all sorts of markets where you assume a market's in breakout territory and you don't see anything above it. Then all of a sudden a weekly reversal shows up, and then you know that there's enough selling there and that there's a new line in the sand overhead that you have to overcome. And that usually means the invisible hand is ready to do some selling, and you're going to have to fight that for a while. But for now, CF Industries looks pretty good. I'll find this. Here we are. We're triple up. We're mid-cycle. It's not very old. And we're going to ride this core position until something shows up that will force a reduction of it or take some profits off. It never hurts to take some profits into the wild run-up. Some people already did that, as we talked about. This big push above here is a pretty vertical run. It probably happened so fast and made so much money that the people who were taking and trading it and trading with options likely took their money off the table. But we still stand inside markup, and we're going to look like we're going to have continuation of it. We don't even show any expansion here. You don't see EXP, which doesn't suggest that this one has any volatility exhaustion either. If you have any comments or questions about CF, let us know. Fertilizer is an important part of inside the global economy, inside food production, in particular for agriculture. It's best to understand what's taking place. You can read about it on the internet. You can follow the feeds on social media. But the fact is, the invisible hand is way faster than all those sources as long as you know how to read them. And that's the key point here, learning how to read them. We'll update this when we need to. For now, we're going to keep this one out there. I might even open this up for everyone to watch so that at some point in time to watch these reviews, you have to buy an access code. We're going to try and get more people to follow along in the matrix. This is inside the matrix itself. This is one of those trends that you can watch yourself. You just need to have an access code to do it. And you usually have to have them to unlock these reports. But for the rest of everyone else who's following CF, thanks for watching today. Keep an eye on this. This is a really important trend, probably one of the most important ones inside the trend CO, which is the stocks, individual stocks that we track. There's more of them. There are about 15 or 16 of them. But it looks like we're not quite done with it yet. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you guys after the holiday weekend.